Started their first loop and finished it before noon. They didn't find any signs that surprised them. The second loop proved just as uneventful. They moved out another half-mile and had just started the third circle when it started getting dark. They set up camp and prepared some dinner. Mark wondered why Gunny had them stay out when they weren't that far from the subdivision. Probably he thought he doesn't want to hear Susan griping about the all-man team being treated differently. After dinner, he assigned guard duties. He and Jess would take the middle shift, and they climbed into their tent. She snuggled up next to him. He tried to talk her out of staying on the team now that she was expecting, but she'd insisted that pregnancy was only a normal biological function and that she should stay on the squad until she got to the point where she couldn't keep up. The following morning, they resumed their patrol. This loop, even though they were only half-mile further out, was over twice as big as the previous one. They found a couple of sets of fresh human tracks, and they followed each set for a short way. However, they all appeared to be from no more than 2 or 3 people, and none of them headed toward Silver Hills. Later they found a set of horse tracks, but Mark didn't know how to tell if they had riders or not. Mid-afternoon they found another set of fresh tracks. Mark could make out at least 5 distinct sets of footprints in the soft dirt, and unlike the sets from in the morning, these were pointed almost directly at the subdivision. The 6 scouts started following them, with Mark praying they would turn away from the direction they were headed. They didn't, and the closer they got to Silver Hills, the more nervous Mark became. He put himself on point and moved slower and slower, not just because he wanted to be careful, but also because the signs this group left behind were becoming more difficult to find and follow as they moved closer to home. When Mark could no longer find any tracks to follow, he stopped and looked around. Several hundred yards ahead of him was a hill that he'd been on top of during a previous scouting trip. One could see quite a bit of Silver Hills from the crest. It was probably about 1,000 yards from the hill to the closest fence line, but with a good set of binoculars or a decent spotting scope, it would be an ideal position to watch the subdivision. Mark pulled out his own set of binoculars and glassed the hill. He didn't see anything out of the ordinary, just bushes and small to medium-sized trees. He went back and slowly scanned every spot on the hill, looking for anything that seemed out of place. He could find nothing suspicious. He waved the 5 women up to his position and told them what he was thinking. Then he handed the binoculars to Chris. "You have the youngest eyes," he whispered. "Give the hill a good once-over and see if you see anything that looks like it might be a person, or even just part of a person." Chris put the field glasses up to her eyes and slowly moved them back and forth. After 3 or 4 minutes, she handed them back to him and shook her head. He had Letty look next, and she also saw nothing out of the ordinary. Mark thought that whoever's tracks they'd been following had probably turned off somewhere, and he missed it. He decided to go back to the last sign he'd found and see if this new theory was right. "Let me look," Susan said. "Okay," Mark answered, figuring that he might as well use this opportunity as a teaching experience. He handed the field glasses to Susan and briefly explained what she should look for. She spent over 5 minutes looking the hill over, only to hand the binoculars back to Mark. "Everything looks okay to me," she said. Next was Olga's turn. She looked for only a minute or 2 when she quickly pulled the binoculars down from her eyes. "A bush moved," she whispered excitedly. "Where?" Mark asked. "On top of the hill, a little on one side. Maybe it was just the breeze." "No, it like twisted and moved over about a foot," she insisted. "Look back through the binoculars and find it again," he ordered. She pressed the lenses back to her eyes and moved them around only slightly. A moment later, she froze in one place. "Got it?" Mark asked. "I think so," she answered. "But it's not moving anymore. Maybe my eyes were just playing a trick on me." "Maybe, maybe not. Look at the landmarks around it so you can tell me exactly where it is."